Florida State had a lawsuit tossed out. No, not that one. What does that actually mean, though?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching, carousel, the portal, and so much more. Getting you ready for the season, which is, oh, would you look at that, 16 days away. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Texas A&M and Florida State season records are coming at you later. But right now we've got Kenton Gibbs, Locked On ACC, Locked On Wolfpack as well, joining me here on the show. So the Florida Attorney General, Kenton, sued the ACC trying to get a public release of the grant of rights deal with ESPN, and that was summarily thrown out, tossed aside. Why would Florida want to do that? This is the state of Florida, of course. And what does it getting tossed out actually mean, if anything, for their departure from the ACC?
So I'm glad that you corrected that in terms of, in the beginning, you said Florida State had a lawsuit tossed out in court, which Florida State fans, if you don't know them,
right,
they get very particular about legalities. Apparently, each and every one of them went to law school. But that's neither here nor there. Now, the realities that you're talking about, yes, this was a suit by Florida's Attorney General to basically make these documents that went into the grant of rights and the TV deal public. And it was based upon the principle that Florida State is a state school. Therefore, all of their contracts should be public to some degree. And ESPN's argument was, yes, they're a public entity. We are not. We are under no obligation to share our trade secrets because we have partnered with a state entity. And so ultimately they came to the compromise of ESPN and the ACC releasing a deeply, deeply, deeply redacted version of the grant of rights and the TV deal and all that. And it really, it didn't amount to much in terms of, like, you can't see. There's so much redacted. If you believe that you can pull meaningfully out of that, if you believe you can meaningfully glean a ton out of that, I would like to ask where and what's your imagination like to do so, because it's pretty impressive. That thing reads a lot like trying to read DMX lyrics when you're reading it for the radio, so it has to be the clean version. You got what y'all want from me and my dog's gonna.
You ever see Ocean's 12 when Basher's at the radio station and they're just playing all the bleeps over and over, and he's like, well, if you want to get on the radio, this is what you got to do. I was thinking of that. I was also thinking of the Red movie when he goes to see Frank Moses' file, played by Bruce Willis, and it's just all blacked out. He's been marked red, retired, extremely dangerous. Now, on the extremely dangerous front, this does not change, and I wanted to talk about this today so everyone understands, this does not change Florida State's standing with the ACC in that they're still trying to leave the league. I don't think this materially impacts their legal situation, the PR side, or anything really. It's something they just wanted. They didn't have standing. It gets tossed out. But I don't think this is a huge legal win for the ACC. I don't think it's a blow to Florida State's efforts. I think everything is still progressing along the same timeline. That was my takeaway. Was it yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a completely separate. Okay, so anybody who was hoping for a big takeaway from this, you haven't been paying attention enough. I'm going to assign you with some homework. Go back, do the research, and understand this lawsuit was completely separate from the 4 that are currently going on in Florida, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Obviously, you have Clemson and Florida State suing the ACC in their respective states, and you have the ACC countersuing in its respective state, which is North Carolina. And let me clean up my language there, because North Carolina preemptively sued Florida State. They are countersuing Clemson, however. So with that in mind, please be aware of the fact that this was a very, how do I put this?
Narrow.
This was an unimportant, exactly. It was a narrow lane. It was unimportant. It's not really orthogonal to the story of whether or not Clemson and Florida State are staying in the conference. It had no bearing on that. This was an AG going rogue to score some political brownie points, which, I mean, more power to her. I hope she did. But, this didn't really have much relevance in whether or not they'd actually stay in the conference.
Yeah, the whole lawsuit situation, I know people want to have quick resolution and know where they're going. And I think a lot of just general college football fans would like to know what's going to happen, where are you going? But there's been a lot of speculation in recent days, Kenton, about where Florida State and Clemson could end up. And I'm not in the Big 12 camp. I don't think that would make a lot of sense. I don't think they'd raise all this trouble and all the money that's going to inevitably be required. Now, that thinking changes for me if they're somehow able to get out of the ACC for free. But even then, I still don't think they'd go through that process to end up in the Big 12. Is there any sense right now, compared to when this all started, whether Florida State and Clemson would rather go to the Big Ten or the SEC, or how ESPN and their television rights ownership of college football contracts changes or alters where they could end up?
You know, there's a lot of smoke going around this thing, right? There's a lot of folks saying, oh, well, Clemson's already secured their deal with the Big Ten and all that. And there's a lot of smoke saying, well, the SEC doesn't want to let them get out, period. If they're going to be available, they want to keep SEC territory fully SEC. And then there's like also the words from commissioners recently that would have you think that neither one of these teams are wanted. I think the truth is somewhere in between all of these things. I don't think that there's a clear, definitive path forward for either team yet in terms of, I know the fans are going to call me idiots and say, oh, our team's already negotiating their deal with such and so. Good for you. I hope you're wrong. For the sake of legality, I hope you're wrong here. But in all seriousness, there's a lot of smoke going on here. There is not enough clarity for me to say with any degree of certainty, this is where I know this team is going or that team is going. Now, I do kind of question how badly do the new conferences potentially want these teams? Because if these conferences have not basically made it a, hey, we're going to have a bidding war situation, it could end up very, very deleterious for both of these universities. In that, why would a conference add you as a full member if they're like, I mean, we don't really have much competition for you. You left the ACC. The Big 12 can only pay you what the ACC could. And our competitor, be it the SEC or the Big 10, is like, I want them. They don't move the needle enough for me to say, come get a slice of this $50 million pie immediately.
Ken, in 10 seconds or less, Florida State wins how many football games in 2024?
10 or less.
Okay. That, I think it's a very valid prediction. Their official record prediction on this very program is coming up later in today's show. Kenton Gibbs, Locked On ACC, Locked On Wolfpack. Appreciate the time as always, my man.
Absolutely. Always glad to be on with you, brother.
Texas A&M might be better than you think right here, right now. Tell you why, coming up next. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, which is better for you, the consumer. Prices that are on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. How about that? They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time just takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., whatever you're looking for, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Texas A&M might just be better than you think, or better than many of you want them to be. Andrew Stefaniak of Locked On Texas A&M is here to talk about that very fact here on the show. And look, Texas A&M is the poster child, Andrew, for you recruit at a high level and underachieve. And I think that makes a lot of people resent the Aggies in the program that they have, and they can't do it, and they're frauds, and they're blah-da-dee-blah-da-dee-blah. But they've got a head coach in there who wanted a place where it's not easy to win. Manny Diaz could win at Duke. It's not going to be this year. I don't even know if it'll be next year. It's going to take a minute. But Mike Elko did a heck of a job there, doing more with less. Now he has a good roster. And yeah, there are some games I think Texas A&M is definitely going to lose. But one of the reasons I think they are better than people might realize this year, or putting them in a preseason top 25 is not actually crazy and not the usual Texas A&M hype, is the Mike Elko factor.
Here's the deal. When you look at Texas A&M and you look at head coach Mike Elko, the way I break this down is like you said, Spencer, he was doing more with less. Now he's going to do more with more. And when I look at Mike Elko, X's and O's, culture, player development, they're all there. The question was, is he going to be able to recruit like Coach Fisher and company did previous? Well, his recruiting class is sitting 7th, 8th, where you look at different places for this year. He's doing it all. He's earned an A from me for what he's done so far as the head coach of Texas A&M. He's done an incredible job in the transfer portal. And now it's time to prove it on the gridiron. And I'll tell you this, people don't understand how good this team can be. They've still got a lot of those really talented players when it comes to 4- and 5-star recruits out of high school, and they did a really incredible job in the transfer portal. And what we're going to get into, Spencer, the schedule really works out nice for the Aggies. This football team is going to overachieve this season, and it's going to impress some people.
They have a win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, of 8.5, which is an upper tier SEC team. I mean, you've got 9.5 for some schools. You got 10.5 for Texas and Georgia. Bama is 9.5. Missouri and LSU are both at 9.5. But the schedule gets off to a rough start, although at home, which is nice. Having the 12s there at Kyle Field, certainly helpful. Now, this Notre Dame game just got a lot more interesting. I have had this as a Notre Dame win in my mind going in because, look, week 1, game 1, even at home, that's a lot, even for a great coach like Mike Elko. You've got year 3 for Marcus Freeman. It's more established. Riley Leonard at quarterback. I think Notre Dame's really good. Then the news comes out that Notre Dame just lost their starting left tackle. And I asked Tyler Wojak of Locked On Fighting Irish about that. He said it's huge. It might be the difference they lose this Texas A&M game. I still like Notre Dame to go in and win, but it is now going to be significantly tougher. This is the equivalent of losing a starting wide receiver. You're not going to see it show up in the box score, but you're going to see it show up on the football field.
On both sides of the football, or for both teams in that game, which is funny because you talked about Texas A&M being the CEO of recruiting well and not performing. Well, this is the bowl game of two teams that recruit well and it never works out. This is the overhyped preseason Cinderella bowl game, and I'm very excited for it. But, here's the deal. Losing your left tackle with the front that Texas A&M has, that is not ideal. This game is going to be won and lost with Texas A&M's defensive line going against the offensive line of Notre Dame, which was already a question mark I heard before losing their projected starting left tackle. And then you flip that, Texas A&M's question mark is their offensive line, and Notre Dame's front seven and defensive line are elite. This football game is going to be won there. And I'll tell you this. I'm going to, for prediction's sake, say that Notre Dame wins this football game. But if I had to give you a percentage, I'd go 51-49. This game could go either way, and Texas A&M can win this football game.
I wanted to use this as my coin flip game on Texas A&M's schedule, but I can only do that once per my own rules that I've set for myself in schedule predictions here on the show. So I think Notre Dame wins week 1, but then Texas A&M, I think, is going to start rattling off the wins. McNeese week 2, I think that's clearly a win. At Florida, and then 3 straight home games against Bowling Green, Arkansas, and Missouri. I have them winning all those games, and the next week in Starkville at Mississippi State. I think the losses could pile up as the back half of the schedule really gets underway for the Aggies, but the most pivotal matchups in there. At Florida week 3, that's a game they could absolutely lose. Florida's not great, but they're not bad. Missouri is a game that, because they're at home, I like. I think Missouri is solid, but I also think Texas A&M is solid. It's the Mike Elko factor for me, and Connor Wegman. Last time I talked about him here on the show, I had a couple different people reach out and say, "Hey, you're underselling this guy. Like you don't know what you got here." I'm like, maybe, we got to see a little more. But then you look at what he has done in his college career. He's not starting for the first time. If he clicks with this offense, you could see Texas A&M get off to a really hot start. I could see him losing a game at Florida in the Swamp or hosting Missouri, but I'm trusting Texas A&M here. I think they're winning both of those games.
Definitely a coin flip. That game at Florida, the Swamp, here's the deal. Before all Gator fans, their hearts are on the floor from what's going to happen to them this season. And not because Florida, I think, is a terrible football team. It's because look at that schedule. I feel so sorry for
worst in college football. Worst in college. They've got the fact that they have 2 of the top 3 odds teams in the ACC in their non-conference, and the back half of their SEC schedule is just disgusting. It's just disgusting.
So, I'm so sorry for Florida fans. Like, genuinely, that is a genuine statement. I am sorry. I think Texas A&M wins that game. The Arkansas game, by the way, it's that's actually at AT&T Stadium. It's neutral.
Okay. That doesn't change my.
I don't care.
That game could be home, road, neutral. You could play that game in Ireland. I'd feel the same way about it. Like,
I don't care one bit.
Arkansas feels like a team that is going to kind of bottom out, make a change at head coach, and it'll be a mutual parting of ways, perhaps. But the Missouri game, how are you feeling?
So, I think that we're going to. I'm not fully in on Missouri, but I have a swing game that Texas A&M is going to win that is not the Missouri game. I think I am 3/4 the way buying the Missouri hype. Not fully, 3/4 the way. I'm a big veteran quarterback guy, a huge veteran quarterback guy. And Brady Cook is the CEO of game managing, and it gets the job done. I also think no one in college football can stop Luther Burden. I'll tell you that right now. I think he's a menace. I think he's a great player. I think I have a swing game that I'm going to tell you all that Texas A&M wins that I don't think many are going to expect, but it's not going to be Missouri. I think that Missouri takes care of business in this game in a close football game.
Okay. At Mississippi State, I think we agree that's going to be a win. Bulldogs are going to be in for a rough year. LSU, even at home, I like the Tigers in that one. I think that is loss number 2 for Texas A&M. Next 2 games, I think, are wins at South Carolina and hosting New Mexico State. No issues for me. Don't sleep on going to South Carolina, by the way. Yeah. I've got an upset in the SEC, which is South Carolina beating Ole Miss at home. Okay. I won't be shocked if it ends up being this Texas A&M game instead. I think South Carolina is going to win a game in front of the home crowd that people don't necessarily expect or are picking them to win. I think it's going to be Ole Miss, but I think it could be Texas A&M as well. I wouldn't sleep on it.
I like Sellers a lot, actually. He's one of my guys this year.
Dynamic quarterback.
I like him. So here's the deal. Here's where I'm kind of going against chalk. I think Texas A&M beats LSU. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So hear me out. Now, I think that both the LSU and Missouri games are going to be really close. Really close. Nussmeier, here's the deal. I am a huge Nussmeier guy. I really am. Huge Nussmeier guy. But we've seen him play one football game. I believe his upside is through the roof, but so is Connor Wigman's. So they are very similar in what we have and haven't seen out of those 2 quarterbacks.
I agree with that.
And so it's at home. I know LSU's made strides to improve that defense. I know that, and it's going to be better. I know they lost a lot of talent. It's a tough road environment. I think I know it's later in the season. Nussmeier will be a little bit more accustomed to playing in these environments, but I'm still in the belief that a young quarterback who really hasn't played a lot is going to struggle walking into Kyle Field, and I think the Aggies win that game.
Okay. All right. Valid point there. Should be a fun football game. Last 2 games of the year. At Auburn, I think that's a loss for Texas A&M. A game they can win. I think Jordan Hare's tough, and it's not so much a shot at Texas A&M, but more a credit to what Auburn has done this offseason. I think they've done a nice job. My toss-up game here is Texas. The last week, that line is 3.5, according to our friends at FanDuel. That is shorter than I expected. It's going to be the most hostile crowd, maybe in all of college football this season. It's going to be a fantastic game. I can't wait to watch it. I lean towards Texas.
Yeah.
But I don't feel strong enough about it right now to make a pick. So that's how I land on Texas A&M, pending a coin flip game. And there are a couple kind of coin flip games in there that I just feel a little bit stronger about. I think that Texas game, because of the rivalry factor, can get absolutely bonkers. So I think Texas A&M is 9-3 or 8-4, pending the outcome of that game in Mike Elko's first year.
I'm with you on that. So I am in the same boat, but I think the Aggies lose to the Longhorns. And it's funny, you hate to be the guy that's going to sit here and talk good about your rival. I think Texas is going to be really good this year. And there is nothing more in the world I would rather do right now than say the Aggies win this game. Not even a question. There's nothing I'd rather say than that. I think Texas is going to be really good. And I think Elko is going to get them there to where they're taking down Texas consistently really on a consistent basis. I don't know if it's this year. That Auburn game will make or break the season for Texas A&M.
Good game.
It's going to be a great football game. I hate that Auburn's young guys are going to be settled in at that point. They're a really young team, really talented football team. A lot of 5 stars, a lot of great players that Hugh Freeze and company brought in there. I've said it on Zach's show, on Zach Blackberry Locked On Auburn show multiple times. I think Texas A&M wins this game, but I think it's going to be really, really tight.
Andrew Stefaniak, Locked On Texas A&M. Your final record prediction for the Aggies in 2024 is?
I think the Aggies go 9-3.
9-3. I've got them 9-3 or 8-4 pending the toss-up. Andrew, appreciate the time, my man. Florida State is going to win at least 10 games. At least 10 games. I'll tell you why, despite me not being a big DJ U fan. Coming up next. Florida State is winning at least 10 games with the schedule that they have. That's Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider, also the host of Locked On Seminoles, joining me here on today's show. I don't love Florida State as a national title contender. I am not a DJ Uiagalelei fan. I do know that DJ can win football games. He led Oregon State to an 8-4 season last year. He won other games whilst at Clemson. I think this FSU roster around him is kind of similar compared to the rest of the league with what they had in Corvallis a season ago, in that he doesn't need to be the driving force. He's just kind of a complimentary guy. He's still just, solid, decent, fine at this point. But when I look at Florida State's roster, I am inclined down in my gut to see a pullback from a 13-0 regular season and ACC championship game. But then I look at the schedule and I go, well, they've got a better roster than that team, that team, that team, that team, that. And you just kind of keep doing that down the list. That's why I feel like they're a lock to win at least 10 games this year, Brian.
I think 9-3 would have to include a couple of major injuries. I'm pretty much right there with you. I know that some of the sports books feel a little differently, but that's part of its betting. They had 10 guys, if I remember, either drafted or at the NFL Combine, so that people automatically look at that and just they stop researching. Bad decision. Florida State loaded up in the portal. They hit it hard. Kids from Bama, kids from Georgia, and they got DJ as well. It's going to be an experienced team that has like 8 starters capable on the O-line. I mean, there's a lot to like. So, and the defense, they don't have a weakness other than a little bit of linebacker depth problem. I agree. I think 10-2 is kind of mild. And I don't dislike the schedule either. There's no NC State. There's no Louisville. That matters. Like, even if you were going to win, it's less attrition to play them. In Florida, by the time they play Florida, no offense, I don't expect Billy Napier to be the head coach. So that's in Tallahassee, by the way. So good luck to the rest of the ACC. I know they got Notre Dame and Miami on the road, but I think they'll split that, and I don't think they'll lose in another game. I really don't.
Yeah, I look at the schedule. It works out really well. Now, they play the first real college football game of the year, and it's going to be interesting because Florida State's going to have the chance to showcase what they can be this year, how legit of an ACC and playoff contender they are in 2024 under Mike Norvell, because Georgia Tech is not a team that is to be trifled with. Now, Florida State's a pretty sizable favorite, but I would not go into that game and think, oh, Florida State's going to cruise. They can have their B game and win easily. Like, this game is being played in Ireland. It is just 16 days away from the day that this show is airing. I think they're winning that game and their next 2 non-conference games, which are at home against Boston College and Memphis. Though, can't mess around with Memphis either. But I think this is a 3-0 start, and I expect Florida State to just kind of out-roster each of those 3 opponents.
That's where I'm at. The only thing there, Seth Hennigan from Memphis is really good, but they've lost, I think, if I remember right, 4 out of their 5 O-line. Meet Florida State's front. Good luck with that. They've got a few NFL guys, including Darrell Jackson, who's 6'6", 330. Memphis doesn't have something for that, I'm going to guess. They also have possibly the best pass rusher in the league in Patrick Payton. Losing 4 O-linemen is not good for that. I think that you're right. I also think you could look at those 3, especially remember BC almost upset Florida State last year. They
Very true. Very true. But that was at Boston
Right.
College. But Jordan Travis was playing in the game. There's been some change. You have a returning quarterback.
Right.
You got Bill O'Brien there, who I think can be a good head coach. I don't know if BC's got the horses to go into Tallahassee and win this football game.
I don't see that. But that's the whole point. If they get past that, and then you got Cal at home, the first true road test is at SMU, maybe. But then you got Clemson at home, at Duke, at Miami. Like, there's nobody you go, The only game that really gives me a lot of pause is Notre Dame because it's in November up there. Florida teams in November in the North I don't like. But Notre Dame has lost their left tackle for the season too. So there may not be a game Florida State is not favored this year. That is something to look at. Miami game's iffy, but we'll see.
I think the left tackle news at Notre Dame is significant. I don't think that's going to move the line. And at home, I'd expect the Irish are still favored. And I do have that as the only Sharpian loss on my prediction here for Florida State's schedule, because you're right. They've got the 3 straight home games: Boston College, Memphis, Cal. I think Cal's actually a solid team in the ACC this year. They're top 20 in returning production. They were a bowl team a season ago. Returning quarterback. They've got a couple question marks at receiver and whether their defense can rebound. But could they scare Florida State for a quarter? Yeah. But can they match up for 4 quarters? No, I don't think their offensive line is going to, be able to perform at that sort of level. But I have them winning at SMU and then at home against Clemson before a win at Duke, and then we'll get to the interesting games here. But the Clemson game, that's going to be tough, but at home, I'll take FSU in that spot. It was a thrilling game in Clemson a year ago. But that SMU game, Brian, is another one that kind of like Georgia Tech. I'm picking Florida State to win. I expect them to win. They should win. They'll be favored to do so, maybe even by a sizable amount. It's not a game where you can just show up, roll out of bed, and ho-hum, we're just going to go play a team and win. Like SMU on the road, that's going to be their first real opportunity to prove to the rest of the conference, which they are brand new to this season, that, hey, we are here, we're legit, and this program is going to be a conference title contender every year once FSU and Clemson leave.
I think that's a fair statement. They got the boosters to do it too. There's a lot of money at that school. But do they have the offensive lineman to block Florida State again? Except for Notre Dame in Miami, and Notre Dame again is iffy. Losing Charles Jagasaw is a really big deal because tackle was their weakest spot. There isn't a team on the schedule that I think, except for maybe Clemson, that can compete with Florida State's defensive front. I think they were going to engulf at least 8, if not 9, of their opponents. And they're just going to be running the ball into 2nd and 8 situations. That doesn't work at any level. So you're right. The SMU game's interesting, but I still think Knowles by 10 or more.
The North Carolina game at home, I have as a win. Notre Dame, I've got a loss, and then 2 wins to end the year against Charleston Southern and Florida. Both those games are at home. I disagree that Billy Napier will be done after this year. I think the schedule's too brutal, and as long as he wins at least 4, maybe he needs to win 5 games, which he could do, then he'll be okay. Are they going to beat Florida State? No, I don't think so. But the games that'll define Florida State's season in more ways than one, whether you're talking about ACC title hopes or even at large college football playoff berths, because I have them at 11-1 or 10-2 with my toss-up game here being at Miami in Coral Gables. I'd feel differently if it were in Tallahassee, but I think Miami's going to be a good team this year. They could absolutely win that football game. Feels like a go-either-way battle, and I like Cam Ward more than I like DJ Uiagalelei. But if Florida State goes 11-1, let's say, and they're in the ACC title game, and they're playing, I don't know, just hypothetically, like a 9-3 upstart Virginia Tech team, and Virginia Tech finds a way to knock them off, or somebody else finds a way to knock them off in the ACC title game, suddenly going 11-1 will be their saving grace to get into the playoff. Because I think 11-2 will get in. Yeah, I think 11-2 gets in, but 10-3 in the ACC, Brian.
If you don't win that title game, it's very iffy at best.
Exactly. That's exactly, because I think even you could have SEC or Big Ten teams, if they're in there at 10-2.
The schedule is valued differently.
It is, and you probably can't get a 2 or 3 loss team into that, or a 2 loss game into that Big Ten or SEC championship game. But in the ACC, you absolutely could, and I think it is rather important, unless everything is going to come down to that conference championship game for FSU to get into the playoff this year with a 12-team format. they've got to be 11-1, and it could very well come down to the game that I have down as a toss-up, and that is at Miami.
Who knows what's going to happen with Mario Cristobal? He is the enigma that keeps on giving in big games until otherwise proven.
Well, it's not as if he hasn't won. It goes both ways. Sometimes his team's laying eggs. Sometimes his team's...
Look at the Clemson game last year. They started a true freshman quarterback and beat Clemson's defense. It's the worst team on earth. If you're going to gamble, don't gamble on Miami.
Here's the interesting thing, because you've mentioned several times that Florida State's defensive line might be the best in the ACC. They can just engulf their opponents. You know who's going to have the horses up front to deal with that sort of defensive line? Miami. This is Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal's third year. You look at the way they've recruited, the guys they're going to have up front. That should be among the best offensive lines, and why, if Miami does win that game, I think FanDuel has that as a point spread of less than 2 right now. It should be one of the best games of the year in the ACC, and could very well, barring a conference championship for a second straight season, ultimately define whether Florida State gets into the playoff.
You said it. That game should come down to the end, though. Who do you like better, Norvell or Cristobal?
Norvell.
Yeah. Do you think anybody?
But allow me to counter. I've got the home team on the other side, and who do I like better, DJU or Cam Ward? I'll take Cam.
Cam had 14 fumbles last year. That is still my concern.
That has to be cleaned up. There's no doubt about it, but he's going to go play behind the best offensive line he's ever had in college football.
Oh,
Wazoo gave him receiving cores and good offensive coordinators, but gosh almighty, they couldn't develop an offensive line. Could not do it.
Yeah, I watched some of their O-line last year. That's a jailbreak. Not
good. Yeah, it was not good. But he still has had fumble and turnover issues in his career. So I've got Florida State 11-1 or 10-2, pending the outcome of that Miami game. You have them same boat, 11-1, 10-2. Exactly the same. Great minds think alike. Brian Smith, Locked On Seminoles, also our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network. Brian, appreciate the time.
Thanks, sir.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.